Of surveillance abuse in the Russia investigation. I'm Julie Banderas. This is the Fox Report. Memo mania gripping Washington yet again as President Trump declines to release the work of ranking House Intelligence Democrat Adam Schiff. The decision comes just a week after the president declassified the Republicans' rival memo with zero redactions. The president sending the document then back to the committee for a redo while criticizing it as very political and too sensitive to be made public. Schiff responding on Twitter and firing back saying this: Mr. President, what you call political are actually called facts. And your concern for sources and methods would be more convincing if you hadn't decided to release the GOP memo 100% before reading it and over the objections of the FBI. This as Republicans accuse Democrats of playing politics and forcing the president to block a memo they knew wasn't releasable.
This is a double whammy. It's a twofer for the Democrats and Mr. Schiff to really create a memo that has got it's a nothing burger otherwise, but it's got some problems to it. And then they get to embarrass them and say, now they're mistreating us. So it's a twofer on their side, but the reality is I want that Democrat memo released.
Molly Henneberg is following all of this from the White House for us. It's a nothing burger. It's my favorite. Who? Why? It doesn't matter. That's not the story. Go ahead, Molly.
Hi, Julie. President Trump says the Democrats' memo needs to be revised, and he insists this should not come as a surprise to the memo's authors. In a tweet this morning, the president said, quote, "The Democrats sent a very political and long response memo, which they knew, because of sources and methods and more, would have to be heavily redacted, whereupon they would blame the White House for lack of transparency. Told them to redo and send back in proper form." The Republicans' memo released last week says the FBI got the okay from the secret FISA court to spy on former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, based largely on evidence from a dossier that was paid for ultimately by the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign. Democrats want their chance to fight back, but their memo has not been declassified yet, and the top Senate Democrat says it should be. Senator Chuck Schumer said in a statement yesterday, quote, "The president's double standard when it comes to transparency is appalling. The rationale for releasing the Nunes memo, transparency, vanishes when it could show information that's harmful to him. Millions of Americans are asking one simple question: what is he hiding?" Republican Congressman Devin Nunes, he's the Republican chair of the House Intelligence Committee, is urging his Democratic counterpart, Congressman Adam Schiff, to make the necessary changes and redactions to the Democrats' memo so that, quote, it can be declassified as soon as possible. Julie?
Molly Henneberg in Washington. Thank you very much. Well, for more on this, let's bring in White House columnist for The Hill, Niall Stanage. No, I didn't say that right, did I?
You were close enough. Niall Stanage, but it's okay.
I want to do your accent. If I could just do your accent, it'd be cake.
It's all I've got going for me, really. But, we're doing what we can.
I love it. I love it. All right. So some are saying that this has literally become dirty politics. The Democrats accuse the Republicans of basically getting away scot-free with having classified information in theirs. The question is, did the Democrats knowingly put classified information in their memo before asking for it to be declassified?
So here's the catch-22. We don't know because it's classified. I mean, this is this kind of circular situation you get into when this happens. It's possible that they did. I mean, they would certainly have a political incentive to do that.
Right.
It's equally possible that President Trump is making that argument for his own political purposes, and we won't know that until the information's out there.
Okay, here's Corey Lewandowski on Fox earlier today. He calls the whole thing a partisan issue. Let's listen to this, and then you can react.
The Democrats specifically put information in this memo that they knew the White House could not sign off on because of national security reasons. And what I think this White House has said and what I've said is that more transparency is better. And what the White House is asking the Democrats to do is to go back and remove the information from the memorandum that would allow the White House to release all of the information.
Okay, so both parties basically accusing the other of including classified information in their memos. The Democrats basically are saying now that that they are being held up, that the president went ahead and released the Republican memo without any redactions. Is this a partisan issue?
Well, it is a partisan issue because opinions of President Trump and opinions of this whole probe are so polarized. Now, the Democrats' argument is that President Trump overrode the objections of the FBI and the DOJ before, so they say, why can't he do it this time? He has a counter-argument, of course.
What kind of classified information are they talking about here that might be in this, you think?
Well, one could be the identification of actual sources. I mean, we know that the Democrats argue that this infamous dossier wasn't the only reason that a FISA warrant was granted against Carter Page. Could there be other intelligence there that does identify individuals, or are we talking more broadly about a situation where sources aren't willing to talk?
Yeah, that is an argument that a lot of people are willing to make, because they say that basically the FISA application, a warrant, is some 1,000 pages long, and that you can't possibly in a 4-page memo, which Nunes had released, actually go about covering every single nook and cranny in all of this. But the gist of the memo is that the FISA memo was obtained by a rebuked anti-Trump dossier, and that was all the information that the FISA court needed, the FBI and the DOJ, in order to commit these surveillance acts. If that's the case, that's glaringly wrong. You need more information. Christopher Steele was an ex-spy, and he's now credible enough to spy or issue surveillance on a candidate. I mean,
yeah, I agree with you. Look, if the FBI had exculpatory information that it didn't reveal, that's an issue. The problem is, you know, all of us in the media, me and you, I'm sure, would love to see everything here out in the open, but that's clearly not possible because of the national security interests. So we're all flying with kind of partial radar, not no radar at all, but a partial view of what's actually happening.
Okay, so then when do you think we're going to be seeing this memo? And is this memo going to contain any new information in it, or is it literally just going to be a 10-page defense?
Well, I think in fairness, the FBI said that the original Nunes memo omitted some facts. So will we see the Democrats' version include those facts that provides broader context?
Right.
Possibly, but there'll be a serious partisan battle to see if this can, in fact, ultimately be released.
Okay, and I also just want to bring up one thing, because after the Nunes memo was released, the president came out multiple times publicly in speeches and on Twitter saying that this vindicated him. I would imagine the Democrats are going to try to prove him wrong.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they're clearly making the argument that the Nunes memo is exaggerated, is partial, is cherry-picking, which is their favorite word. So once that comes out, then clearly it will be pushing back against this idea of vindication.
All right, Niall Stanage, you are not done. Did I say Stanage right this time?
Perfect.
Oh, thank God. All right, well, we're not done with you, because you're going to be joining us at the bottom of the hour, so stand by. So much more to go on and talk about in Washington. He will be joining us later as we break down the winners and losers of this week's massive bipartisan budget deal that had to do with spending of your tax dollars. Nancy Pelosi didn't support a plan she actually helped craft, and conservatives are blasting memos and members of their own party for supporting ballooning deficits. Stay tuned for that. Meantime, new developments in the abuse allegations involving former White House staff Secretary Rob Porter. A group of senators now demanding an explanation from the White House for why Porter had ongoing access to classified information. Meanwhile, a second White House staffer now resigning amid domestic abuse allegations. And then today, the president addressed the claims targeting his former employees. Ellison Barber is in Washington with the very latest.
Julie, President Trump was on Twitter this morning, and he seemingly addressed the domestic violence allegations against 2 of his now former staffers. Trump wrote in part, quote, "People's lives are being shattered and destroyed by a mere allegation. Some are true and some are false. Is there no such thing any longer as due process?" In less than a week, 2 White House officials have been accused of domestic abuse. Speechwriter David Sorensen's ex-wife told the Washington Post he was abusive during their marriage. Sorensen denies the allegations and says his wife abused him. The White House says Sorensen resigned on Friday. 2 days before he resigned, Staff Secretary Rob Porter resigned after 2 of his ex-wives accused him of abuse. Porter's first wife gave these photos to Fox News, her eye swollen and then healing as a purple and yellow bruise. She says Porter punched her in the eye while they were on vacation in Italy. His second wife had this to say in an interview.
I told them all of the details of my marriage, including verbal and emotional abuse, and including the incident when he pulled me out of the shower They were also made aware of the protective order that I signed in June of 2010, and they were also made aware of another time when I had called the police to our home after a domestic disturbance.
Many are questioning the timeline coming out of the White House and trying to figure out who knew what and when they knew it. White House Chief of Staff General John Kelly reportedly found out about the allegations against Porter in the fall, and a report in the Washington Post claims that a year ago, White House counsel Don McGahn found out that Porter's ex-wives planned to make accusations that could threaten the aide's security clearance. Kelly initially defended Porter. Once those photos were released, he issued another statement saying in part that he was shocked by the new allegations. Some outlets reported that Kelly offered to resign in the wake of all of this. The White House says those reports are wrong, and General Kelly has not offered his resignation. Julie?
Ellison Barber, thank you so much. Vice President Mike Pence returning from the Olympics in South Korea today after meeting with the nation's president about ways to keep pressure on the North. The vice president saying he was encouraged by talks with President Moon Jae-in. This despite discussions between the South Korean leader and the North Korean delegation and an invitation for a future meeting with dictator Kim Jong-un. Greg Palcott has the very latest from South Korea.
Julie, there was a bit of a diplomatic breakthrough away from the Olympic sporting action on Saturday. The influential sister of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met with South Korean President Moon, inviting him to Pyongyang for a summit with her brother. If it happens, it would be the highest level meeting between the two countries in years. Moon said they should work to make conditions to allow it to happen. Vice President Pence, who has been in South Korea for the games and politics, said Saturday there was no daylight between the U.S. and South Korea in their aim to rid the North of its nukes and missiles. Pence and President Moon watched a skating event on Saturday before the vice president returned to the States. Moon also watched a joint Korean hockey match with North Korean officials. We, too, were at the Olympic site on Saturday and found while the focus indeed was on sports, it was also on politics. Take a look and listen.
The flag's flying briskly here at the entrance to the Olympic Park at Pyeongchang, South Korea, a symbol of the international nature of the Games. But this year, a little bit of a political overtone. The flag of South Korea on one side, the flag of North Korea on the other, and in the middle, the flag of the United States. Power politics on a sports stage, maybe with a happy ending.
I think it's an okay thing. That's sort of the basis behind the Olympics, is that it brings everybody together. And
it was just a real sort of emotional thing, you know, to see the two Koreas come out together. A lot of tension, and it was diffused, and just a beautiful, beautiful night.
It's better that they're working together than against each other.
By the way, that first woman we spoke with won a medal at the 1980 Winter Olympics at Lake Placid. Politics was a big deal then, too, between the U.S. and the then Soviet Union. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Julie.
Greg, thank you so much. Lawmakers end a government shutdown hours after it begins, but the compromise over how to spend your tax dollars not exactly coming without some D.C. drama. What else is new? So who are the winners? Who are the losers? Following the latest budget battle, we're going to take a closer look still ahead. Plus, it is being called the most intense combat between two arch enemies in years. An Israeli warplane shot down after Israel launches massive airstrikes on Syria. So what started this escalation in violence? Next.
Iran seeks to use Syrian territory to attack Israel for its professed goal of destroying Israel. This morning, Iran brazenly violated Israel's sovereignty.
A Fox urgent now. Fox News has confirmed Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has spoken with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today, in fact, after Israel launched massive airstrikes inside Syria, marking a military operation we have not seen in years. Israel says the strikes were in retaliation for an unmanned Iranian drone that apparently infiltrated its northern airspace. David Lee Miller joins us from Jerusalem.
Julie, an Israeli fighter jet was shot down while conducting an air raid over Syria. Events leading up to the incident are in dispute. Early Saturday morning, Israel says an Iranian surveillance drone crossed its northern border with Syria. Israel accuses the Iranians of establishing military facilities in Syria to support the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Israel released video of what it says was the infiltration. The drone was reportedly in Israeli airspace for about a minute when Israeli authorities say it was shot down by an Apache helicopter. Iran, meanwhile, would not confirm Israel's account and called the Israeli version of events ridiculous. Syria says the drone never crossed the border and was gathering data on ISIS. Hours later, Israel struck back. Israeli officials say during a series of air raids targeting the drone's mobile launcher and other Iranian and Syrian defensive batteries, its planes encountered massive anti-aircraft fire. An Israeli F-16 crash-landed on the Israeli side of the border. Its 2 pilots ejected, but 1 was seriously wounded. The last time an Israeli aircraft was shot down by enemy fire was more than 3 decades ago during the First Lebanon War. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the drone's infiltration that sparked the hostilities was not unexpected.
Iran seeks to use Syrian territory to attack Israel for its professed goal of destroying Israel. This morning, Iran brazenly violated Israel's sovereignty. They dispatched an Iranian drone from Syrian territory into Israel, and this demonstrates that our warnings were 100% correct. Israel holds Iran and its Syrian host responsible for today's aggression. We will continue to do whatever is necessary to protect our sovereignty and our security.
Russia, which has troops in Syria, is calling on all sides to de-escalate the tension. The Pentagon says the U.S. supports Israel's right to defend itself. And underscoring just how volatile the situation was here today, for a brief period of time, Israel shut down its main airport over concern Syria and its allies could launch a missile attack from the north. Julie?
David Lee Miller reporting from Jerusalem. Thank you, David. Meantime, 2 police officers back here at home killed in the line of duty after responding to a hang-up 911 call. Now leaders from the state's governor to President Trump are reacting as a police force mourns tonight. Plus, an illegal immigrant convicted of killing 2 deputies showing no remorse. What he said in the courtroom to the victims' families. Still ahead.
This killer is a despicable human being. Nothing can bring Danny back, and so for that, there'll always be that void.
Two police officers have died after a shooting in Westerville, Ohio. It is about 15 miles north of Columbus. A tragic day today. Officers Eric Joring and Anthony Morelli were responding to a 911 hang-up call when they were fired upon by a cowardly suspect who is now in custody tonight. The police department holding an extremely emotional news conference earlier today. President Trump tweeting on the incident as well. My thoughts and prayers are with the 2 police officers, their families, and everybody at the Westerville Police Department. Brian Yanis is live with more. This is probably one of the most gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching news conferences I've ever had to watch.
Yes, I would agree with that. This is a small family of police officers there in Westerville, and the 2 fallen Westerville officers were Officer Tony Morelli and Officer Eric Joring. 39-year-old Officer Joring was a 17-year veteran of the police force. About these fallen heroes.
True American heroes. 2 gave their life today responding to calls of assistance out of a potential domestic situation. Both officers gave their life in protection of others. Those are true American heroes.
This shooting took place in the Ohio suburb of Westerville, 15 miles north of Columbus. According to the police chief, at 12:02 p.m. local time, police received a 911 hang-up call. 8 minutes later, both police officers arrived at the apartment responding to a possible domestic situation. As soon as they arrived, they were met with gunfire.
Scene is secure. Medics now. We have 2 officers down, critical. Suspect is down, also shot.
Just a harrowing sound there. A long procession of police officers led the bodies of the fallen heroes from the OSU hospital to the Franklin County Coroner's Office. Governor John Kasich, who lives with his family in a nearby township, tweeted, "I've spoken with Westerville's city leaders and Chief Morbitzer and pledged whatever support they need from the Highway Patrol. We extend our prayers and deep condolences to their families and fellow officers. Let's pledge ourselves to never forget their service." The suspect is in custody, wounded at the hospital. The Fraternal Order of Police of Ohio has set up a GoFundMe page for the fallen officers' families. GoFundMe.com/FOPOLICE. P, Lodge 9 Help Fund. You have it there on the bottom of your screen. Give if you can for these two families who are going through unspeakable tragedy.
And also offer up your prayers for them as well. It is just so tragic and so unnecessary. Brian Yanis, thank you. Another tragic reminder about the dangers law enforcement face every day in every community across our country. An illegal immigrant, speaking of cowards, convicted of killing 2 deputies, smiling as the judge read the verdict and threatening to kill even more officers as he was led out of the courtroom. A jury found him guilty of murder in the shooting deaths of 2 Sacramento area deputies in 2014. Will Carr joins us now with more. Will?
And Julie, this case has already turned political. In fact, President Trump's re-election campaign has been airing this ad that features now convicted cop killer Luis Bracamontes.
It's pure evil. President Trump is right. Build the wall. Deport criminals. Stop illegal.
After being convicted for their murders, Bracamontes had the chance to look the officers' families in the eyes yesterday, but instead of offering remorse, he hurled the exact opposite. He could be seen blowing kisses and smiling. Bracamontes shot and killed Deputy Danny Oliver and Detective Michael Davis Jr. back in 2014. On Friday, he went as far to pledge that he wanted to kill more members of law enforcement as he's being escorted out of the courtroom. Take a listen.
We find the defendant guilty. We further find
We'll kill more cops soon. I'm going to kill more cops soon, is what he said in the courtroom. Bracamontes was also convicted of attempted murder and carjacking. His attorneys say that he was suffering from mental illness, that he was on meth when he killed the officers. But in the end, a jury just wasn't buying that as a legitimate excuse. He's now facing the death penalty.
There's really no joy. It's more of, I think, a quiet satisfaction.
The death penalty phase of his trial starts on March 5th. Julie.
Will Carr, thank you. Lawmakers keeping the lights on with the passage of a massive bipartisan budget deal. We're going to break down the winners and losers and whether Republicans are running up the kind of debt that they railed against under the Obama administration.
It's too bad a lot of it is political, right? Everybody's smart enough to know this is fundamentally bad, right? When you got $21 trillion in debt and we've got a $1 trillion deficits as far as the eye can see.
Capitol Hill emerging from the brink of yet another budget standoff as lawmakers pass a massive bipartisan spending bill. The measure signed by President Trump on Friday pours tens of billions of dollars into military and domestic programs. It also lifts spending caps and extends the debt limit. More than 70 House Democrats voted for it, breaking from Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, who obviously opposed the bill because it didn't address DACA. Fighting against it in the Senate was Kentucky's Rand Paul, who is now accusing his party of fiscal hypocrisy.
This new stimulus of deficit spending will be as big as President Obama's stimulus. Don't you remember when Republicans howled to high heaven that President Obama was spending us into the gutter, spending us into oblivion, and now Republicans are doing the same thing?
Let's bring back Niall Stanage, White House columnist for The Hill. Man, I nailed your last name on that one. So who are the winners and the losers from the overnight shutdown?
You were a winner in the pronunciation games there. In terms of the overnight shutdown, this is one of the interesting things where the centre did hold, I think, in this case. We got an agreement that the congressional leaders like Rand Paul obviously didn't love it. But also, you know, a lot of the Democrats on the left of the party, they're not thrilled about this deal at all either, because it leaves the DACA recipients behind.
So you got your winners, Paul Ryan, Schumer, and Mitch McConnell. Okay, your losers, the Freedom Caucus and deficit hawks?
Yeah, because this does increase spending by a very significant amount. I mean, we're talking about approximately $300 billion over a couple of years.
Right.
And it, as you pointed out in your introduction, Julie, it busts through the previous spending caps. Right. So those people, the Freedom Caucus type guys, they're not thrilled with this at all.
Okay, I'm not calling these people's losers. It's just that this was in the Hill. Okay, let's talk losers.
Blame me. It's
Nancy Pelosi. Again, I'm going by the Hill here. Nancy Pelosi, mixed, and Rand Paul. Let's talk Nancy Pelosi, because her magic minute, or what I'd like to call a 480-minute speech on DACA, some called it grandstanding. Nonetheless, she is most disappointed with the fact that DACA did not make it into this. And she had something to say about it, and I want to put this statement up on the screen. The fight in the House to protect Dreamers is not over. I'm greatly disappointed that the Speaker does not have the courage to lift the shadow of fear from the lives of these inspiring young people. What was the scene behind the scenes? What was the feeling behind the scenes as the speech, first of all, was being carried out? And it really didn't get Democrats anywhere.
The blunt answer is that I think the speech was seen as a bit of a gimmick and a bit of a distraction. Nancy Pelosi made that speech and it became a big thing on social media among people who agree with her. But it was distracting from the fact that she didn't get anything for the so-called Dreamers. That didn't work. It was cut out of the deal entirely. That's a problem for people like Nancy Pelosi with her own base, because her own base is very vigorous on that issue, and she didn't really bring home anything that they could, hang their hat on.
All in all, though, this was a big win for Republicans. I mean, it was a big win for the military. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis scored in military funding, and that was something they were concerned about if the government were to shut down again. What does this bipartisan spending agreement actually show, first of all, about the government, and what does it say about the Trump administration and their ability to actually get something done?
Good news, I think, in that respect. I mean, one of the critiques of the Trump administration and of Congress was that it had become dysfunctional. To that extent, anytime Congress gets anything done in a bipartisan way, it's a good thing. It shows government works. Anytime you show government works, that's a good thing for the people in power. And obviously, we have President Trump and Republicans holding both majorities in both chambers.
I want to talk about spending. There's a bit of a double standard here. First of all, the Democrats feel like, for the not including the 70 Democrats that voted for this, say that this is an enormous amount of money. I mean, Rand Paul, a Republican, he voted against it because he said it's an enormous amount of money. It's actually the same kind of stimulus that went into, effect under the Obama administration, but for some reason it's getting more criticism now. I do want to play one additional soundbite from Rand Paul addressing this matter and then have your reaction. Go ahead and play that. Okay, we don't have it. So basically what he says is that this new stimulus of deficit spending will be as big as President Obama's stimulus. Don't you remember when Republicans hailed to high heaven that Obama was spending us into the gutter, spending us into oblivion? And now Republicans are doing the same thing. Are they?
Well, there's a lot of spending in this bill. Now, they argue that it's for important things like the military, which is getting the bulk of it. But look, the big picture here is everyone's against government spending in the abstract, but not against government spending taken away from things they want. That's why we get a situation where whoever's in power suddenly finds the idea of deficit reduction less appealing than they did when they were in opposition.
We've got John Yarmuth. He spoke earlier with Neil Cavuto, and he basically talks about the rising cost of government debt. And that is something a lot of people will look to and say, look, this is a lot of money and our debt is massive. Can we afford more debt? Of course, with the tax cuts, that was one of the arguments that, you give these tax cuts and again, more debt. Let's play Yarmuth's interview if we have that portion.
Do you worry now the markets are going to take up a sort of momentum of their own and all of a sudden compound your problems and compound the debt?
Well, absolutely. You've already got about, I think, 7 basis points increase in 10-year treasuries over the last 6 months. You get another increase like that, and it becomes a real serious problem. And I think that's more probable than it is unlikely.
So the question is, does the rising cost of government debt seem to be sparking and spooking the markets?
Absolutely. That's a real possibility. The markets like the fiscal house to be in order, as we say. That is always a difficult thing to do in the political world because it involves taking things away from people. And that's a difficult thing to do in politics.
Okay, so then what can we tell people about the market? Because we've been watching the market this week. It's been very startling. And the president has been very proud of the fact that the market has reached all-time highs during his over 1 year now in office. But this week, it has hit historic lows. they talk about correction and that this is something that's normal and that people should not be panicking and selling off. What do we tell people?
Well, I wish I could predict it, otherwise I could make my fortune. But I mean, the difficulty here is that anytime a politician ties their own fortunes to those of the stock market, they leave themselves exposed to these kind of fluctuations. Having said all that, the stock market is in a much improved place over the course of the Trump presidency. It's up by a very serious margin. So obviously the hope will be that this does not reverse itself. It's a correction, but that's still 10% off an all-time high.
Yeah. All right, Niall Stanage, thank you very much. Great to have you.
And you, Jill.
I'm so happy that after a fourth or fifth pronunciation, I've really gotten your name. All right, thank you. A high-tech company may be tracking your movement through your phone even when it is disconnected. No joke. Have you ever been on that show, Big Brother? Well, you actually are every day of your life. Coming up next, we're going to have a report on the stealthy tactics used to collect data from your cell phones and how companies can turn it around for profit.
Somebody's watching you. Somebody's watching you. Somebody's watching you.
At least 18 people are dead, dozens more injured after a double-decker bus crashes in Hong Kong. Crews cutting open the roof in order to free passengers trapped inside. It is still not clear what caused the crash, although the bus is said to have been speeding. Well, Google, get this, may be tracking you even when your phone is not connected. How is that, you wonder? Well, the company collects data and then uses that to sell targeted ads to users. The business model is called surveillance capitalism. But does that data collection work even when your phone is disconnected or on airplane mode? Fox News Headlines 24/7 anchor Brett Larson did some investigating on Tucker Carlson's show this week, and you join us here with some answers. And you guys found some pretty startling stuff.
It was very startling. And mind you, we all know that Google is keeping an eye on us. We knew that going into this. They've been keeping an eye on us online for years. But now that they have a mobile operating system, exactly what do they know about where we're going? Take a look.
We know that Google is tracking us. We agree to it when we set up our phones. So we wanted to figure out what exactly Google is learning about us throughout the day. So here's what we're going to do. We have two identical phones. The only difference between these two phones is this one is in airplane mode. Both of the phones lack a SIM card, and they haven't been set up to access any Wi-Fi networks. So for all intents and purposes, these phones have no connection to a data network. We're going to keep them with us throughout the day. And while I travel around D.C., we're going to figure out just what Google is finding out about me.
Our first stop, Sim's Convenience Store, just outside our Fox bureau, for a quick coffee. From there, we took a walk to the Capitol and took a quick walk around the Senate office buildings, and then decided to hop in a car and head around town.
Hello. We're going to the Children's Hospital, please.
To run our test, we had to do more than walk the block, so we took a tour around our nation's capital. First, due north to the Children's National Medical Center Hospital, then west to St. Albans School and the National Cathedral. Our tour around town was a 14-mile journey that lasted more than an hour. The entire time, the phones had no access to the internet.
Oh my goodness.
Not a Wi-Fi connection and not any cellular data service. It almost seemed quaint to assume that Google wouldn't even be able to collect data on me.
Let's head back to the bureau, my friend. Oh, that church is beautiful.
Google's business model is simple. Collect data on its users and then use that data to sell targeted ads. It's a business model called surveillance capitalism. But does that critical data collection work even when your phones aren't connected?
So we're back here at our Fox bureau in D.C., and we've got both of our phones exactly how we left with them. The only difference, really, I snapped a couple of bad selfies at the National Cathedral. But otherwise, they have stayed in my pocket for the entire day. So let's find out what they know. This is our man-in-the-middle device. It's basically a Wi-Fi network that these phones are going to connect to once we turn their Wi-Fi on. It's going to pass data through it on the way to Google. But on the way, we're actually going to get a copy of the same data that Google's going to get. We'll be able to decrypt it and then find out where we've been throughout the day.
Within minutes, the numbers rolled in. The phone that wasn't on airplane mode registered more than 100 locations, 130 activities, and even 152 barometric readings. As soon as it hooked up to our Wi-Fi, it transmitted 300 kilobytes of data straight to Google. The phone even logged our exact locations, tracking us all around town, the Capitol, the hospital, the school, and the cathedral.
Now, you may notice what's missing here is the exact route that we took, but it got that data too. It knows when I got out of the car.
The metadata has a time log down to the very second, tracking everything when they think that you're walking, riding, and yes, even getting out of the car.
Okay, so you're thinking, this isn't a big deal. I'll just put my phone in airplane mode. Yeah, we thought of that too. This is the other phone that we had with us that no SIM card also remained in airplane mode the entire time. Let's see what kind of data it captured.
The phone with airplane mode activated actually logged more locations and activities than the other phone, and it also transferred hundreds of kilobytes of data to Google as soon as it was activated.
The only thing that's missing from this map is our stop at the Children's Hospital, but it still knows we were there. There it is. Exiting vehicle, 100% accuracy.
Through complicated user agreements and free software, Google gets users to sign away their privacy for nothing. They're even following you in the places that most people would expect total privacy: government buildings, a children's hospital, a private school, a church. Every move you make, every step you take, Google is watching you.
Now, in a statement to Fox News, Google did say users, in part, are free to opt out of the tracking. But we should note, when you opt out of the tracking, all the fun stuff stops working.
Yeah,
so
that's
then
true.
you don't get the alerts that your commute might be slow. So this is the technology give and take. It's this is really convenient. It's nice to know that, hey, there's an accident on your usual route to work.
I love
But then
that.
they also take in this other information.
You know what I was really surprised about was the airplane mode. I always thought if you put your phone on airplane mode, it basically turns off the signal. What if you turn your phone off?
If you turn your phone all the way off, you're fine. If you put it in a Faraday cage, you can get those on Google or on Amazon. They're little bags you can put your phones in that block RF. That would stop a lot of what we got. But there's still technology in your phone. There's an accelerometer. There's a barometric pressure sensor. There's a light sensor. So there's all these other data points that your phone is still able to get when it's not connected to a data network, not connected to Wi-Fi, that still kind of help Google guess where you are. Like when it knew that we were driving or walking, and it needs to know that because it wants to give you the right ad. Are you walking past a coffee shop or are you driving towards one?
Right.
Those are two different
So
things.
how does a phone track anything if there's not actually a data network?
That comes from the accelerometer, also Bluetooth beacons, and though the airplane mode phone didn't do this, but the one that did have Wi-Fi on but not connected could still see other Wi-Fi networks, and a lot of Wi-Fi networks are identifiable by their location. So it's there are lots of ways that Big Brother knows where we are.
You are the biggest geek. I just want to say.
You can tell from my fashion choices
love
in
him to death, but whoa. All right. I love you.
My VCR still blinks midnight.
Brett Larson, thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Julie.
Well, arguments getting underway in a legal battle that could decide the fate of President Trump's border wall, and the judge behind the bench was at the center of a major controversy for candidate Trump. We are going to explain. Plus, here's a sneak peek of what to expect on tonight's Watters World.
Sean Hannity.